what I wanted to do was develop a way to control my anxiety. And this became even more important when I got promoted to assistant chief, because now I have nobody to blame at this point. You know, when you're a captain, you can say, look, I'm not in charge of the shift. I just occasionally fill in. When you're the assistant chief, you run the shift. So basically the buck stops with you. So I began to really focus on my command capabilities and how to become good at command and how to avoid becoming overwhelmed by that stress that, you know, I'm talking about. So I had to begin the self-analysis process, and the best way that I could find to self-analyze how I was commanding fires was the video. So I began to videotape myself on every working fire, and I would go home the next day and I would watch that video and I would listen to see, you know, was I not hearing when interior crews were marking me? Because I think that's a huge sin. You'd have a crew inside of a working fire and they mark you. They should not have to mark you more than once. I was paying attention to see if I was giving my assignments clearly. Was I articulating? Was I displaying stress in my speech? Was I stuttering or whatever? So essentially, that is what led to the birth of me uploading videos. Is I was simply trying to become better at command, and I thought to myself, okay, if I'm using this as a tool to learn, maybe there's other people out there that are really trying to become fire officers and really want to hone their skills. So I thought, you know, I'm going to upload it. What I didn't anticipate is how thick your skin needs to be when you start putting your videos out to the public, because man, there is a rough crowd behind the keyboards out there. But at any rate, I didn't allow that to discourage me. I thought very similar to, you know, I think a lot of us has probably taken the class, The Art of Reading Smoke. They show you video of smoke coming out of buildings, and you try to identify where the seat of the fire is or whatever. Well, basically all I was doing was I was just taking the global approach to this. I was showing the whole thing from start to finish, you know, the good, the bad, the right, the wrong, the whole thing. And I thought, you know, I'm giving it my best shot, and hopefully this helps somebody. So one thing that I was trained early on was to always have a clipboard, to have all of your items right there. Every morning when I come on duty, I pull my clipboard out of my bag, and I begin to assemble several pages, one being a tactical worksheet. So this is the overview of my tactical worksheet. And I'm not saying this is the perfect tactical worksheet for everybody, but what I'm telling you is it fits me and it helps me tremendously. So if we look at the top part of my tactical worksheet, in this area right here is all of my benchmarks. But I've also got some other important areas like water on the fire, accountability, and things like that. And what those are just reminders. And sometimes I use these and sometimes I don't use these, but I can slash these out every time we reach a certain benchmark. And then at the bottom of my tactical worksheet, probably the most important part is right here in the middle. It says part-time 1. Those are the benchmarks that I'm hoping to have already in place by the time our alarm room asks for the first par, which is 15 minutes into the incident. So I'm using my tactical worksheet to help me drive the scene. So, and that's a big question that I would ask everybody is the scene running you, or are you running the scene? Because I think that's a very key thing here. You have to be ahead of the entire incident. Another thing that I keep on my clipboard is a mass casualty worksheet. Because this rarely happens, it's just one of those things that I think that would be a useful tool if we were to have a bus flip over on the freeway or whatever. I keep a Mayday worksheet. I have never commanded a fire where we've had a Mayday. We have had these happen occasionally at Newark. They've all turned out positive. However, in the event that there's a Mayday, this sheet is always on bottom. I simply flip my clipboard, and this helps me navigate through that Mayday. And then the last thing I keep is a truck roster. The reason I do this is because I've seen in a couple NOSH reports where they weren't exactly clear who was on duty. So the truck roster, I keep a copy with me in the command car. I keep a copy at my desk. And then my second in command guy, the captain on the rescue, has one with him. And that would be that if I'm tied up on another incident, or if I were to be involved in an auto accident or whatever, he's got that right there with him. He's ready to take over. So keeping a clipboard and keeping those items ready will help, I think, people get through that. So the next one we'll talk about is what I call the 7 deadly sins. And essentially, these are the things that are constantly reoccurring in NOSH fatality reports. So vitally important, as soon as you arrive at the firehouse, check your SCBA and top it off if it's not full. I just read a NOSH fatality report where 3 members entered, the first in crew entered, and nobody had a full bottle. And they stress the importance of that, to make sure that your bottle's full. The other thing is accountability is mandatory. Licking County fire chiefs have agreed to utilize the passport system, and I know everybody's just a little bit different. However, in numerous NOSH fatality reports, they talk about failure to maintain accountability. And I think that's vital. I think it also, if you're not maintaining accountability, it can create liability for the incident commander. I mean, because it's cut and dry that you will maintain accountability. The other thing is the importance of a 360. I think there are still departments that are initiating the attack without doing a 360, and unfortunately, it's causing fatalities. There was just recently a NOSH fatality report published where a department initiated a fire attack without doing a 360, and unfortunately, it cost a life because of that. Everybody has to maintain contact. At Newark Fire Department, we do not allow freelancing. So it's important that a team maintain voice, visual, or direct contact at all times. Nobody should be operating alone. If somebody runs out of air, the entire team comes out. Or if there's an assignment, the entire team goes and takes care of that assignment. Another big thing that we talk about is all teams will exit prior to their low air alarm sounding. And there's a huge push with this both with NIOSH and with UL. They want to make sure that people are not operating on the interior during their emergency reserve. And, I got to be honest, when I first got into the fire business, your low air alarm just meant that you had about 7 or 8 more minutes of time to operate interior. And we've got to correct that, where, we don't have guys doing that. We want them out. Also, I think it's vital to have firefighter assistant teams ready, and that includes RIT and EMS. If you're watching a video or you're at the scene of an incident, pay attention to how quick RIT gets assigned, and pay attention to whether an EMS sector gets assigned, because when one of our brothers cuts his arm with a chainsaw, that's not the time to start looking for a trauma bag or whatever. So I'm big on that. And then a continuous risk analysis. And I suppose the best way that I can identify this is if we're interior and we get an all clear on that building, and we know that there are no victims in there, that should immediately cause you to pause for a second and say, should we dial this back a little bit? And I've got an example of that coming up a little bit in just a few minutes here, but I think sometimes we get locked into a mindset that we got to go in and we have to be aggressive, but we fail to acknowledge that we've met certain benchmarks, and then we fail to reanalyze what kind of risk that we're taking, and that's what gets us in trouble frequently. This is important to me. The shift that I command on one unit, we are all a team. And what that basically means is we are all equals. I am I am the shift commander, but it doesn't mean that I'm any more important than one of the guys driving or the guy that's on the hydrant or whatever. I value the input of everybody that's on my team, and everybody gets a say because we are all part of that team. And I think it's important that fire officers acknowledge that it's not the my way or the highway approach. It's a team approach, and I value the input of the team that I work with. So I got a couple examples here of what I would call some aha moments where throughout the time that I've been an incident, it's moments like this. Okay, so this is a fire that we had on Idlewild Avenue. This is a medic crew right here. They were in the vicinity of this fire when this run came in, and the dispatchers provided information that there was what sounded like good, solid information that there was going to be a victim in here. This medic crew that I have 100% confidence in, all they had with them was a water can, but they done everything they possibly could on this fire to attempt to make entry and get an all clear on this building. And I think that's vital. So when you show up, the cards may be stacked against you. The deck may not be in your favor, but you have to look at the totality of all the circumstances, and you have to go aggressively at it and try to make a difference. And, you know, hats off to this crew right here, because they definitely went after it. I received a lot of messages about this fire, and the guy said, man, that medic crew was like super aggressive, and you know, you should be proud of them. And I can tell you, I definitely am proud of them, because this is how you make saves right here. Is you know, when the first crew rolls up, they may not necessarily have an attack line with them, but they can certainly intervene and make stuff happen. Okay, so this is an important fire in my career. This is a 3-story balloon frame that's was on Hudson Avenue. This picture was snapped at about 45 minutes into the fire, and we just could not get ahead of this thing. So it was at this time that I pulled everybody out of the fire. I wanted to get a recount on everybody, make sure that we had everybody and everybody was well, and I wanted to talk to all the officers. So I asked all the lieutenants and captains to come over to the command post, and I said, I need all of you to walk around this building and somebody come back and tell me a good reason why we should put anybody in here. We had an all clear on the building. We're 45 minutes deep into this. Obviously, the building is starting to degrade, and I was starting to have concerns. And you know, I'm an assistant chief, but I still remember what being a firefighter is all about. I love to get in there. I love to get dirty and love to have some fun. But at some point, we got to say, okay, we got to put a stop to this. So my lieutenants and my captains walked around this house, and they all came back to me, and all of them said, we don't think we should put anybody back inside this house. And so we were defensive from there on out on this building. And I think that's important. Number one, I invest in my officers and I value their opinion. And we collectively made a decision here that this was not in a safe place any longer where we could operate on the interior. And that's back to that risk analysis thing. Once you develop your risk analysis plan, you have to go back and reanalyze your plan to see if it's at the same level that the situation presents. And obviously this had changed. We had an all clear on the building. The building conditions were changing, and essentially we opted to back out of that situation. Okay, so this is a fire that we had at a condo. And what I like about this is this is what we call a tailboard critique. I'm sure most of you have seen this or do this or whatever. But there's a lot of value in a tailboard critique, because this gives me the opportunity to convey to the entire team the pluses and the minuses or whatever This is not the time where you're going to correct deficiencies, but it allows everybody else to have their say in the game or whatever. If they had some questions or concerns, or if they had something that maybe I didn't see, but that they wanted to bring that to everybody's attention, that's their opportunity to do that, and I think that's vital. But it gives them a voice, and I think that's more important than anything. It lets them know that they're a valuable team member, and I take that pretty seriously. So this is a fire that we had recently. There's a couple things that I want to point out here. If you notice on the Alpha Bravo side of the structure, there's a master stream flowing in the second floor window. So this is something that one unit has practiced. We've talked about this and we've practiced this. The driver of that engine is actually Rescue 1. The driver is handling that master stream while the backseat guy and the officer stretch the attack line. And we make this possible, we put a gate valve on our deck gun. So the driver can engage the pump, he can run the throttle up, and he can open and close the deck gun after he gets it aimed appropriately. And I would like to tell you that all of this was planned and we've done this on purpose, but I would be lying to you. We'd planned on operating a deck gun because what he's basically doing is he's knocking down this area of fire in the back of the building on the second floor. Now here's what I can tell you is about 60 seconds after I snapped this picture when I was doing my 360, there was a homeless man that came out of one of those closets, bedroom areas on the second floor, and he bailed out of that window that you see is fully involved. And basically he was able to do that because of our driver operator knocking down that fire while my crew was stretching that attack line. Now, did we know somebody was in there? Nope, we sure didn't. We had practiced that deck gun operation, just like a quick 20 or 30 second, blitz attack with the deck gun. And the reason we had practiced that is we know that it's a hard hit, and maybe it would make the difference at some point in time. We didn't realize it was going to make the difference on one of the first fires we ever done this on. And lo and behold, like I said, about 60 seconds after I get around to the front of the building, I begin to hear some commotion, and there was actually a gentleman laying just about in the area where you see that firefighter standing. And he bailed out of the second floor window there, and he survived and is actually doing well. And I think we can all agree that he would not have done that had that fire not been knocked down by our driver. And I think that just goes back to identify of the team importance. We are all equals. Had my driver not had his A game going that day, I would say there's a pretty good chance that that guy probably would have died in that house fire. So that's why I stress the importance that we are all equals, because the guy on the hydrant, the guy standing at the EMS sector with the cot and in a trauma bag, everybody plays a vital important part in what we do. This one it turned out perfect. Like, you couldn't have planned it better. I couldn't be more proud of how the whole thing went down, honestly. Okay, so before I take some questions, I got to give photo credit to these four guys, because without them, we wouldn't be able to collect the images that we do and push some of this stuff out. So thanks to my brother, Darren Decker, who works at 181s, Pat Guansel, he is one of our friends at Newark, Steve Wingate's on Heath Fire, and then William Widmer's, he's actually the gentleman that took the photograph that you guys used to push out the notice for this training. So with that, let's see if we have any questions that anybody might have, and we'll work through this.
Yeah, guys, if anybody has questions, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask away.
If I may, what's your opinion, personal opinion and professional opinion, on the departments that will essentially do what your department does, is you have your battalion chief or an officer that of such rank that runs out pre-engine and gets there first and can start doing 360, as to such as one that would run their basic engine, and then depending if it's rule not tanker, or your multiple engines, and then the chief gets there a little bit later and then takes over. That ranking officer gets there a little bit later in the command and then takes over.
Yeah, that is a good question. I've had numerous people ask me, just from watching my videos, do you always get there first? I don't always get there first, but that's my hope. Because if I can get there first, it allows me just a little smidge of time where I can start formulating a plan and kind of collect my thoughts. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, so goes the first line, so goes the incident. If I can get there ahead of everybody else, I can do a 360, I can formulate a plan, I can look for the closest hydrant. There's a number of things that I can do. And it doesn't always work out that way, but I can tell you, I can definitely say beyond a shadow of a doubt, I feel 10 times better when I'm the first arriving guy. Whereas if I'm the second or third arriving guy, I'm kind of playing catch up. I gotta do a 360. I gotta figure out where everybody's at. I gotta make sure we have accountability taken care of. And then I might have to correct some issues if something's not going exactly the way it should be. So I am of the opinion, whenever possible, I think that the shift commander or the in charge, whatever you want to call it, if he can be in an SUV or a pickup truck or whatever, and he can get out ahead of the pack, and it buys him 30 seconds even, that 30 seconds is so valuable. Usually the first thing I ask when I get out of the car is everybody out of that building? And what I'm hoping is one of the homeowners or the occupants will say, yes, everybody's out, because then I can formulate my game plan based on the fact that we have an unoccupied dwelling. So yeah, I think it's extremely important.
All right, there were a couple things that popped into the chat log here. Ed Davies asked blue card. I'm not sure if he's asking for your general opinion on blue card or what specifically he's asking, but go
Blue
ahead.
card incident command. Here's what I can tell you, and I'm not receiving endorsements, I'm not receiving money from anybody. I thought I was really good at incident command, and then I took blue card incident command and it opened my eyes. If you have the resources, if you have the money and you're able to get the time to take blue card instant command, it's just one more tool in the toolbox. If you've watched the videos at Newark, we use some of the blue card and we don't use some of the blue card, but it is training that you cannot put a value on. Just simply going through the reps for blue card instant command is worth every dime that they charge you. You spend 3 days just simply going over reps. You act as the instant commander for one rep, and then you act as the first arriving engine, and then you act as the first arriving ladder, and that's what you do the entire day is you command incidents. And I think it's extremely valuable. But I would say that for a lot of training, I think it's extremely important to get away from your community, go out of state, and go someplace else and take some training. Network with other people, see what they have to say. I never even thought to put a gate valve on our deck gun of our engine until another department had brought that up, and I thought, good grief, never even crossed my mind. So I've been through blue card. As a matter of fact, I was a blue card instructor for a while. All of our officers at Newark are required to take blue card as soon as they get promoted to lieutenant. And again, I would say that for just about any training, try to get as much training as you can.
All right, there's another one. Keith Norman was curious if you would be willing to share your worksheets.
Absolutely. I've had people email me. I already have those worksheets up to a link. I'll tell you what, when you guys post this video, I'll comment on it and I will share my links in the comment section. It's nothing that I'm trying to hide from anybody. I'm all about, we all have to help each other get better at this. And if you guys think that I've got a good tactical worksheet that would be helpful, then I would be more than happy to share you all those tactical worksheets, the Mayday worksheet, the mass casualty worksheet. I'll just put that in the comments section.
Cool. Austin wanted to know, how do you start the conversation as a lieutenant to your bat chief to consider changing to more aggressive mentality?
That's a good question. Because a lot of it is a change of the culture. And sometimes to get culture change, it's about letting the dinosaurs retire. So if you're not willing to wait it out, if you're wanting to be aggressive, I think what you have to have is you have to have some solid evidence that supports what you're going after. So I just recently had an experience with one of my officers. He came to me and he wanted to do something. I said, convince me. If you think this is important, I need you to convince me. So I would say go to your battalion chief and have some solid evidence. Nothing that's opinion based, because I can tell you we all put out fire just a little bit differently. People in New York and people in California, we all do it just a little bit different. The question is, are we getting a fire put out? So if you can find something where UL or NIOSH or one of those agencies supports what you're going after, that's what I would take to him or her and say, hey, I've got some ideas. I think it's time for a change.
Cool. All right. And Carter was asking, do you have any advice for a high school student planning to enter the fire service?
Yeah. I wish that our local vocational school would have had fire and EMS when I was a kid, because I would have loved it. I remember going through high school, sitting through a history class, and I thought, I just want to be a firefighter. I'm not concerned about the Spanish-American War or whatever. So if your vocational school has a fire and EMS program, go after that. If you live in an area that has a volunteer fire department, go talk to them, because maybe they have a junior fire department. Outside of that, I would say keep your nose clean, get good grades, and try to absorb as much as you can. And follow the good advice of a probationary firefighter. If you're fortunate enough to get accepted onto a firefighter or a fire department, go in with an open mind and a closed mouth and try to absorb as much as you can for a little bit before you start talking. I think that's vitally important, especially in this day and age.
Ben said, Chief, what is your policy on when and how to deploy the 2.5-inch attack line? Thanks, from a firefighter in Maryland.
All right. Okay, so typically the way we do things in Newark, and again, everybody is a little bit different. So just because that's the way I do it doesn't mean that I'm right or that anybody else is wrong. And I always try to put that disclaimer out there. If we're attacking a fire in a private dwelling, we typically use an 1 3/4 line. The reason being is it's faster, it's lighter, it's more mobile, and it gives plenty of gallons per minute based on how that building is usually divided up. Usually you have 10 by 15 rooms or a small bathroom or whatever. It's when we get into a commercial occupancy, that's when we start pulling under the 2.5-inch line. We need more reach, we need more punch, and we need more volume. And it's going to be a matter of, you kind of got to go with your gut. So if we're absolutely just staying defensive, if it's a defensive fire, we'll probably go with the 2.5. And if it's a commercial occupancy, we're going to go with a 2.5. Whereas if it's in a private dwelling, we're going to go with an 1 3/4 line.
All right. Guys, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. I'll keep reading these if you guys.
You're doing awesome, sir.
Thanks, Chief. So SAFD wants to know, what does your department use for incident training, software wise, just the blue card training software?
We actually have a defined thing that when you get promoted to lieutenant, you're required to take blue card incident command. You're required to become a fire instructor because we would expect you to train at the company level. And then with each promotion, you're expected to go take additional training. And they like reoccurring training. I would say once a year, our chief wants to see people go someplace and take training. Granted, there is a lot of valuable training on the internet. I could spend days upon days on the internet, either on UL or going back through NOSH fatality reports, or going through firefighter close calls, just all kinds of websites. But we actually have it laid out that number one, our promotional material is developed in building blocks. So you're getting some building construction, you're getting some methodology, you're getting how to reason with adults. But then also, once you get promoted, you have to go get your fire instructor, you have to get blue card incident command. And then, like I said, with each promotion, there's more training.
All right. Hopefully these are doing you guys justice. If you have follow-up questions to what he's answering the question with, feel free to throw them down there. Or like I said, unmute yourself and join in. So Ed also had a question about, what is your opinion on staying in the vehicle after the 360? Also, aid in the car with you or not?
Okay, super controversial. I can tell you that I've deleted more comments on my YouTube page because if I get out of the car, everybody tells me that I'm freelancing and whatnot. And if I stay in the car, I've actually had somebody call me lazy. He's too fat and lazy to get out of the car and do his job. It must be too cold for him. So the vast majority of the training that I have had says that when things are really going south, most everybody wants to be inside the car. It's a controlled environment. You can hear the radio. I can tell you that in the bad car that I'm in, I've got 4 different radios in that car. I've got a computer that identifies how many trucks is responding, how many trucks have arrived on scene. I can read the notes. So I would say if I had to pick one or the other, it would be I would stay in the car. However, I've also had issues where I just felt like I needed to get out of the car. And bear in mind, everybody's required to do a 360. So if I'm trying to force myself to get back to the car, I'll do the 360 and then jump back in the car and announce that I've established command, and I'm stationary. But there are times when I can't just get the car positioned where I need it to be, and I've got no choice but to go mobile. If you decide to go mobile, the one thing that I will tell you is make sure you can hear your radio, because that seems to be one of the biggest problems is when guys go mobile, they're not hearing people marking command. And when somebody marks command 2 and 3 times and they're not getting a response, to me, that's troublesome. That tells me that command is not doing their job. So again, the vast majority of the training that I have says in the car is the place to be. Or I know some they'll open up the rear hatch and they have like a command board and all that stuff. But again, I'm not saying that I'm right, and I'm not saying that I'm wrong. We're all trained just a little bit different. And I think certain situations throw you a different scenario, and you just got to roll with the punches.
All right, Battalion Chief Chad Morris had a question here for you. What's your current opinion on vertical ventilation on new construction homes?
Okay, This is another one that I get a lot of comments on. I should have screenshot the number of people that I've blocked on YouTube and included that somehow into my my presentation. So typically, on an ordinary private dwelling, we do not put people on the roof, because if you look at every home, or the vast majority of a private dwelling, there's windows in every single room. And I can have a crew throw a ladder and take a couple windows out and do horizontal ventilation and be just as effective. And I can do it faster and safer than putting people on the roof. Another thing that we have to deal with at Newark is we have a lot of homes that still have slate roofs. And if anybody has ever been on a slate roof when it's wet or cold, you know that it is definitely extremely slippery and dangerous. So the only time that I would definitely go to the roof is if I had a multifamily dwelling where there was like a common hallway or a stairwell that we wanted to get the smoke out of, or a commercial occupancy that didn't offer the windows, things like that. Again, I'm going to say it one more time. I'm not saying that I'm absolutely right, and I'm not saying that anybody would be wrong to do something different. It is just what has worked well for me and the team that I work with. We rarely go to the roof.
All right, and Chief Rob Fisher had a question for you. His says, having watched some of your videos, I noticed you command outside, not inside your vehicle. Blue card encourages the IC to be isolated without distractions. Curious as to your reasoning on thoughts regarding this, which we hit on earlier a little bit, but if you had anything extra.
Yeah. So there are times that I choose to get out of the vehicle. Sometimes it's because I can't get the vehicle position where I can see all of the important stuff. There are other times that maybe I'm trying to evaluate some other situations. I wholeheartedly agree. Blue card is definitely a huge proponent of being in a controlled environment where you can hear your radio and you can write, you can take notes and all of that stuff. There are just times that I feel like it's necessary to get out of the vehicle and either take a look at something or reevaluate something. Absolutely. You'll see it both ways. And actually there's times that I do it on purpose, because I'm kind of testing myself to see how, what is my comfort zone? Am I comfortable operating outside of the vehicle? Am I able to maintain my tactical worksheet outside of the vehicle? Things like that.
All right. Christian was curious, in your organization, do you make the line selection or do you let your officers decide?
It's a combination of both. If I specifically want a 2.5-inch line, then I will announce that. If I'm leaving it up to the officer, then I'll just tell them, hey, first arriving, you pull a line, you're going to be fire attack. And I'm all about allowing my lieutenants and captains to, maybe they have something they want to try, or maybe they, if the rescue's got 4 guys on it and they say, hey, look, let's go ahead and pull a 2.5 on this. We've got some extra staffing. I support that. I don't want them to be robots. I want them to use their brain, and I want them to look at what the circumstances are, and I want them to make decisions. So there are times that I'll specify, but there are other times that I want them to make that decision.
David had a question for you. He said, Chief, I apologize, logged in a little late, may have missed it, but are there instances where you are coming off your buggy packed up, such as confirmed entrapment, responding to a mutual aid fire? Not sure exactly how you all function down your way. Appreciate your comments and thoughts.
Okay, so I do have an air pack in the car. I don't know that it has ever been utilized. It's there for like an emergency situation. I would say 99.9% of the time, I'm either, if it's in the city of Newark, I'm going to be commanding the fire. If we're going mutual aid, I will go and offer my assistance to the incident commander. If it's a, younger guy who doesn't have a lot of experience, what I might say is, hey, you're doing a great job. Do you want me to just hang out here with you, and help you command this fire? Because I think that builds confidence. It helps that person feel more comfortable, and they can develop their skills. Or I might get an assignment as a safety officer or a sector officer. The only time that I could potentially see me grabbing an air pack is if I arrived way ahead of an engine or whatever, and there was a confirmed entrapment, and it looked like that I could potentially get in there and pull somebody out. If we had several of our units tied up on other incidents and I was waiting on a mutual aid company, that might be a 7 or 8 minute wait. If mom's saying, hey, my kid is in that bedroom, I'm positive, then I would probably pull that air pack and I would probably go in and try to make a grab. It's not the best case scenario, and it's certainly not the safest thing to do, but I think that would be the right thing to do, because I've laid in bed many a nights asking myself that very question. In what situation would I put an air pack on and go in by myself?
Yeah, and just to go along with that, I don't know. So Nick had a question here. He asked, could you go over the demographics of your city and your department, and maybe include what you're dealing with as far as mutual aid companies, what you're running with, because you guys do have a little bit of a challenge there too.
Yep. Okay, so the city of Newark is about 50,000 people. We have a large area of 2-story balloon frames. I would like to say that we're expert at balloon frame house fires, because that seems to be a lot of what we do. We typically operate with our minimum staffing is 16, and sometimes it's up to 20. And so we will be, on a good day, we'll be responding with 2 medics, 2 engines, and 2 ladders, and a battalion chief. However, at any given time, one or a portion or all of those units could be tied up. And so we're surrounded by mutual aid departments. 2 of our neighbors can give us 2 crews right away. They have paid staff 24/7. And Granville would send us 2 trucks right away. Heath would send us 2 trucks right away. 2 other neighbors, they have paid staff during the daytime and as volunteers at night. So it could be a situation where I could be waiting a while for some help, or our mutual aid could be in there pretty quick. It just depends on what area of town we're talking about. So on a typical house fire, Newark can typically handle the initial assignment. Once I arrive and would announce a working fire, that would bring us an extra 2 engines and another medic unit. And that would definitely be mutual aid companies coming in at that point.
Yeah, hopefully that gives a better picture as to the thrown on a pack question too. So Kyle had a question here. He said, what of your tactics or strategies would you change if you were in a more rural type setting where your next due may be 15 to 20 minutes out?
Okay, that's a good question, because I am an assistant chief on a volunteer fire department. I live in a rural area, and I figure I might as well help these guys. So for the last 30 years, I've been active on a volunteer fire department. So here's the one thing that I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt is you have to change your tactics based on the resources you have on scene, not the resources that has been dispatched or the resources that is responding. I would not fight fire nearly as aggressive out in the county like we do in Newark, because we have got to wait on our resources to show up. And it's got nothing to do with training or expertise. It's a matter of available manpower. For instance, we would not have a RIT team immediately available, so we're gonna have to scale back our risk a little bit until we get adequate resources on scene. We may not have an EMS sector. So, and I even tell the guys at Newark, when you run out into the county, bear in mind that you don't have 16 guys coming behind you. So you have to look at the totality of the circumstances you have, and please make a good judgment. Don't just automatically pull a line and go interior, especially if there's no victims in there. If the occupants meet you in the driveway and they say there's nobody in there, that's probably a good time to hit that from the outside and knock it down from the outside, and reevaluate everything. So I can tell you the volunteer department that I'm on, our initial assignment is 5 engines and 4 tankers in an EMS unit from the initial get-go. We don't care if anybody beats us into our fires. We're not about that. We call the closest, fastest mutual aid that can fill the alarm card. And if somebody beats us, great. If we're first there, then we're going to make the call or whatever. But definitely, you're going to have to adjust your tactics based on your available manpower. And I think the biggest example I can say is, people watch FDNY on YouTube all the time and they want to try to get super aggressive. And here's what you need to understand is you don't have 40 people arriving within 6 minutes like FDNY does. So you have got to adjust your tactics accordingly. That way you don't get yourself into a bind.
Ed had a question as well. He said, do you change your command style, tactical sheets, etc. for a technical rescue event, trench, confined space, high angle, etc.?
Okay, so if we were to have a technical rescue event, depending on what the situation is, number one, it would change up my tactical worksheet, but there may be somebody else in charge. I can tell you that my captain that rides Rescue 1 is an expert at ropes. I can tie 4 knots. So I would look at him and say, brother, what do you need? And I would make it happen, and he's going to be the one making all the calls. He's going to say that we're going to do this, this, and this, and this is what I'm going to need. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm running the show. I'm just making the calls on the radio saying, hey, I need, the county rescue team, and I need this, and we need a Stokes basket or whatever. So I don't want anybody to think that I know everything about everything, because that's the furthest thing from the truth. I have swift water training, and there's some other things that I've been involved with, but there's areas that I'm not extremely well trained in, and I'm willing to say, hey, is there anybody else here that's better at this than me? Because by all means, this is a team effort, and we want that person running the show.
All right, Ben had a question here for you. He said, Chief, you said sometimes you get out of your vehicle when you can't see everything you can see. What are the things you always want in your line of sight on the fire ground?
Okay, so our policy says that you must be able to view the entire incident. That's first. If the fire was on the back side of the house, for instance, the Hudson Avenue fire, all of the fire was on the back of the house. I had to keep getting out of my vehicle to walk back there to check the progress. And this is where you got to have trust in your officers. We had a fire in a 4-story apartment building one time, and I will never forget this. It clearly identified that you have to trust your officers. Possible fire on the 3rd floor, and an officer was very excitable and got on the radio and said, we got heavy smoke on 3. And I thought, okay. So I started assigning guys to start cutting locks and popping the hatches, the roof hatches and the stairwells. And I started getting hose deployed and all that stuff. And I no sooner than unkey the mic, and a captain walks up to the command car and says, hey, I don't know what building he's in, but there's some food on the stove in 317, and there's a slight haze of smoke in the hallway. And I thought to myself, how could it be that drastically different, So you have to be able to rely on your officers to give you accurate information. If you're inside of a house fire and there's no furniture in the house, tell the incident commander that, hey, there's no furniture in here. It's an unoccupied dwelling, you know, because that's pretty important. So I got to be able to see what's going on. And if I got an officer that can convey that with a very clear picture, great. If not, then I got to go back there and I got to take a look, you know, and see what's going on. If it's a trouble spot and I don't have a safety officer, I might want to roll around to that side and take a look at that for myself, you know. If I'm trying to make the decision, hey, I'm thinking about pulling guys out. We had a house fire. It's the Boylston Avenue house fire. Back of the house just was not going out. We had 3 hand lines inside operating, and the back of the house wasn't going out. I'm thinking, what am I missing here? I'm just not getting it. So I get out and I take a quick look, and I immediately order everybody to evacuate the building. I'm thinking, I don't know what's going wrong here, but we're not here. So what we found out after we got the fire extinguished is they had about 45 car tires in a bedroom in the back of the house. And that's why 3 hand lines wasn't making progress. So it's in situations like that where the picture just isn't feeling right, something doesn't seem right, or I can't get an officer to give me a real clear picture. I got to get out of the car and go take a look.
All right, Jordan had a question here, something that is near and dear to my heart. Most of Central Ohio as well, I would say. Chief, do you run a quint? If they're first due, what functions are they performing?
Okay, and Jared, I want you to give your input on this too, because I'm curious about, you know, what other departments are doing. So we do not have a quint. We used to have a quint. We run a ladder out of Station 3. It has 500 gallons of water, and if it was first arriving, I would basically treat it as an engine. They would pull an attack line. They would attack with their tank water. Otherwise, if they were second or third due, I would try to treat them as a ladder company. I would not have them catch a hydrant because it's a pain in the butt to put hose back on that truck. And I would probably give them a ladder assignment. Again, I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm not saying that anybody is wrong. I'm just telling you that's what works for Newark Fire Department. Now, Tower 1 downtown, out of the station where I operate out of, they have pre-connect lines, but they only have 150 gallons of water. And I know for a fact that by the time you charge the pre-connect line, that means you have about 18 seconds worth of water, and that's it. So I would not have them pull an attack line and attack a fire on the inside, would not do it. But let's hear what you have to say, Jared. I'm kind of curious since you said that.
Well, yeah, we have, I mean, as you know, we have the same truck you have. Your ladder 3?
Ladder 3, yeah.
107-foot single axle, right? So
yeah.
We have the same truck, and then we also have a 100-foot platform, both of which the platform's ladder 302, the 107-foot stick like yours is Quint 303, both of which have both options, just like you were saying. First due, you're going to pull a hand line and put fire out. So I think where the tactics become more of a conversation is in that second, third due arrival order and what that timing looks like. That's when we're really having more of a debate on, you know, globally as to what are you having that company do? Are they doing engine operations or are they operating as your truck company? You know, and it's just sort of, it's going to be like you were talking about earlier, depending on what other resources you have coming. We're not operating like FDNY, like you mentioned. So, I mean, if an engine company operation is needed, that's what you're going to utilize them as. So that's how we function. And I think across Central Ohio, other than special townships like Granville and New Albany, and then obviously big cities like Columbus, the majority of us have quints, specifically in reference to a ladder with water capabilities. Now, what your water capability looks like is going to vary. So that's going to sort of dictate, you know, your operations, but just my 2 cents.
And I would agree with you. That's pretty much how we handle things at Newark.
So Drew said, your dispatchers do a great job. How are they trained?
You know, our dispatchers are the unsung heroes. There's no way for me to get video of them doing their job. But what I can tell you is I would frequently call them and say, hey, thanks so much. You guys did an awesome job. I would occasionally drop them off a box of donuts or whatever. I know a lot of our dispatchers personally. So they are definitely the unsung heroes, and they do an outstanding job. They operate by policy. For instance, they give us a par check at 15 minutes. If I ask them to strike a second alarm, they follow the run card, and they do an outstanding job. They are, I'm trying to think, they are certified, and I don't remember, help me out here, Jared, dispatchers.
With EMD and so on?
Yeah, our dispatchers are EMD certified. And I can tell you that one of their big things is they get us toned out very quickly. So as soon as they pick up the phone and somebody says my house is on fire, they'll go ahead and queue up that card, and it pops up on our live CAD screen, and we're already heading to the truck. And while we're heading to the truck and while we're getting our gear on and heading out the door, they continue their questioning. You know, are there anybody trapped inside? Is this a private dwelling or a multifamily dwelling? How many floors is there? So they do a really good job about collecting information, especially while we're on the fly. And again, I wish there was some way that I could get them more recognition in my videos or whatever. It's kind of impossible, but I can tell you that I acknowledge the fact that they do an outstanding job, and I talk to them every day that I'm on duty. I give them a call, and I have to put trucks in and out of service, or they might call me and say, hey, we got a 911 call. We don't know exactly, what you want us to do with this. So somebody's got a dog stuck underneath of a porch. Do you want us to generate a run number, or you want to go take a look at it? Or but they are EMD certified, and I know that they do recurrent training monthly, and they just do a fabulous job.
So I'm not sure who this one came from, but they said, Chief, I noticed the dimensions of the fire building as you pull on the scene. Is that something you have pre-planned on your MDT, or is that something you estimate?
That's something I estimate. And I was pretty proud of the McKinley fire because I was only off by 20 feet on that one. So back when I was on an engine, my officer stressed the importance of being able to estimate how long the stretch is going to be. If you're pulling a 150 line, or if you need to pull a 250, or pull the garden lay or whatever. So I kind of got in that habit of being able to estimate building dimensions just by taking a quick peek at it. And the reason I try to announce that, I don't normally announce it too much on private dwellings, because most of us know a private dwelling somewhere in the area of 30 by 40, or if it's a ranch, it's going to be, 25 by 60, whatever. But a commercial occupancy, they might not know exactly what building that we're even responding to. So I think it's good to allow the incoming companies that give them that heads up. Hey, I've got a 50 by 100 building with heavy smoke showing throughout, So it's just something that I try to do. And I'm not always accurate, but it's something that it's just something I try to do, because the other thing that it helps me to gauge, my water flow and stream reach, should they pull a 2.5 because this building's 100 feet long or whatever. So it's just one of those habits that I've tried to get in the habit of. When I pull up to a commercial occupancy, I try to give the building dimensions, if I can quickly guesstimate it.
Cool. All right. This one's from one of the schmucks I work with. Andrew's curious. He said, hey, Chief, you had an apartment fire at 967 Grafton about a year ago. Could you go over that fire with us? Just some initial some of the initial actions, lines pulled, your initial assignments.
Okay, yeah, and this is what I want to start making more videos about, because I can see a lot of questions. So we've been to that apartment complex, I'm going to say 6 or 7 times in my 30-year career on working fires. So we're familiar with that apartment complex. Very narrow, tight parking lots. So you have to be very precise on positioning your apparatus. If you lay a supply line in and you clog up the parking lot, you're not getting a ladder truck in there. So you might as well forget about it. So the top floor apartment was on fire. And just to rewind a little bit, the cause of that fire was actually the gentleman left an unattended candle on the couch. And he went into the bathroom, I believe, to take a shower, and then he discovered my apartment's on fire. So he ended up jumping from the top floor of that apartment building. He sustained very serious burns. But at any rate, first rule of thumb that I can tell you is when I pull on scene of a working fire, I automatically request our investigator and I automatically request the power company, because I know I need them. And the sooner they get there, the better for both. If I have a working fire in a multifamily dwelling, I automatically challenge myself, why should I not make this a working or a second alarm? Because essentially you have more than one dwelling on fire. So I immediately requested a second alarm on that, requested level 2 staging. We had fire starting to come out the windows. Immediately sent the first arriving ladder crew to the roof, because like I previously talked about, there was a common hallway with a common stairwell that I knew we was going to need to ventilate. So that was one of those rare circumstances where I actually sent a ladder company to the roof and said, open the roof up. I also wanted to know, did I have fire in the attic space? So our engine crew got an attack line up the stairwell. They said the apartment was pretty much fully involved. When they opened up the door, they said it pushed them clear to the floor in the hallway. Anytime I have fire out more than 2 windows, I automatically request a backup line, because that usually indicates you have fire in more than one room. So what I'm basically saying is, if you have fire from 2 windows, that may or may not be one room. But if you have fire from 3 separate windows, that usually indicates you have 2 rooms burning, which means I want a backup line right behind the attack line. So they had an attack line in place. The backup line said as soon as they opened the door, the backup line immediately started hitting the fire over top of the head of the attack crew. And the attack crew said they were able to focus on the fire in the apartment, and they knew the backup crew was hitting the fire over top of their head. They had a knockdown on that fire really quick. Everything flowed pretty smoothly on that fire. For the most part, I was very happy. Our mutual aid companies rocked it out. We ended up flying that guy out, sent him to OSU hospital because of his burns. But it wasn't for blind luck. I can tell you that one unit in my team has been up to that apartment building and stood in the yard on more than one occasion and has said, what are we going to do if we have a fire? And as a matter of fact, we were up there the week previous to that fire on a food on the stove. And after we ventilated the apartment and handled the problem, we stood in the parking lot for 10 minutes and talked about, what if we had a working fire? How would we place the apparatus? And I think that's important. When you go out on a fire alarm, man, that's the time to look for the FDC. That is the time to look for the hydrants. That's the time to look for power lines. That way, if you're a ladder operator, you know where you're supposed to be positioning. So in my opinion, when you get a fire alarm, once you get the alarm cleared, use that as a training moment and start looking around the building. But that Grafton Road apartment fire, we pulled 2 hand lines. We pulled a 3rd line into the adjacent hallway, just in case there was extension. There was not extension. We had no fire in the attic space, and we had no other victims other than the sole occupant who was forced to jump from the 3rd floor. He actually had to go through the fire to get to a window to escape from, which is very unfortunate. But he's recovering. I believe he's still going through rehab, and he survived. So,
wow. So SAFD is wanting to know, what is the difference from your structure fire alarm to your working fire assignment that you call to them on the radio?
Okay, so a structure fire assignment in Newark for a private dwelling would get 3 engines, 1 ladder, 1 medic, and the battalion chief. If it was a commercial occupancy or a multifamily dwelling, that being 3 or more apartments, it would be 4 engines, 2 ladders, a medic, and a battalion chief. Once I make that a working fire, the working fire assignment's 2 engines and 1 additional EMS unit. Those 2 engines are basically my RIT team, and the EMS unit is to cover the extra firefighters if I need to set up, a second EMS sector, one on the front of the building, one on the back side of the building. So basically, a commercial occupancy would give me an extra engine and an extra ladder right off the bat.
Kyle is curious, do you have videos that you could upload from your volunteer department fires?
Very rarely do I have that opportunity. Occasionally we get some helmet cam footage, whatever, but they're just few and far between as compared to Newark. I can tell you, we stay pretty busy at Newark in regards to fire, but the volunteer department, we just don't have a lot of fires. And then trying to get the apparatus position where it's getting good video is another problem. So the opportunity just doesn't present itself. That's not to say that I wouldn't upload that video if I had it. Just not nearly the opportunity like I have at Newark.
Right. Dave had a follow-up question here. He said, Chief, I appreciate your comments on the air pack question. Here's another one. What is one of the most unique lessons a senior man gave you early in your career that has stuck with you to this day?
I don't know if I would call this unique, but early as an assistant chief, we had an alarm drop at a hotel. It's a 7-story building, and we're used to running a lot of fire alarms. And my captain was a senior man to me. He was an outstanding captain, and he and we would learn a lot from each other. At any rate, we arrived. It was middle of the night, and mentally, I had already made up my mind that this was just an alarm drop, and psychologically, I was already heading back to the firehouse. It wasn't until he announced, Chief, we're on the 3rd floor, we've got heavy smoke on 3, send us some hose. And I began to realize that I was not mentally prepared at all for him to say that. They were doing some remodeling in that hotel, and one of the hotel rooms was actually on fire due to some rubbish and some linseed oil and things like that that had collected. At any rate, our typical assignment for an alarm drop is 2 engines and a ladder and a medic and a battalion chief. Well, needless to say, I didn't have anybody geared up, standing in the foyer awaiting for a call like that. I'm pretty sure the rest of us were already mentally heading back to the station. At any rate, I requested the alarm office to upgrade it to a working commercial fire assignment. We began to quickly get fire hose up to the 3rd floor. They got the fire knocked down. And during the fire critique and after the fire, I apologized and said that will never happen again on my watch. We will treat every single fire alarm like it's a fire until we determine otherwise. And I think that is probably one of the most valuable lessons I've ever had to learn the hard way. I'm glad nobody got hurt. I'm glad we didn't lose the building. I'm glad it turned out as good as it did, because there would have been nobody to blame except for me for the failure there. I mean, I have to own that one myself. I failed to tell the ladder crew to get dressed and report to the lobby. I failed to tell the second arriving engine to get dressed. So I just basically failed in that one. I assured my captain that will never happen again. I put him in a very bad situation, and it was a hard lesson. But more important than anything is I admitted my deficiencies. I let them know that I'm human and I make mistakes. And I told them that will never happen again.
Yeah, Chief, thanks for sharing that. That's pretty huge. You know, we all make mistakes, and being able to own those and take something away and be able to give it to us, that's awesome. So appreciate that. So Robert Wynn was asking, in your pre-plans, do you have a program, the computer, do you have a program in the computer you guys use in which you can pull up and see what you need, or that all apparatus see what they're facing during operations to gain fire under control?
So right now, we are in a transition mode where we're getting ready to switch to some new software. So we have put pre-plans on hold for right now. So a lot of what we're doing is just on the history that we have on the building or being previously there. We talk to the occupant and try to gather information. And I'm a huge believer in pre-plans. The problem is we just don't have the capability right now to collect that data and get it uploaded where it's readily accessible to everybody. So we have somebody that's in charge of computers, which is definitely not my ball game. When we get that new software, then we will have that capability, and it sounds like it's going to be working great. But right now, we definitely have that struggle. We don't have the pre-plans readily available.
Rob Robertson asked, Chief, how do you try to overcome the challenges of not having additional command staff, specifically under 40-hour staff, specifically after 40-hour staff are gone, and having staff to strategic command functions?
So what he's talking about is during the daytime, Monday through Friday, the chief, the deputy chief, a captain, my fire marshal, my prevention officer, all of those people will show up and help me, you know, if they're available. And I love it. A lot of those guys were available in the Boylston fire, the Essex fire, and they were a huge help. Middle of the night, I don't have that. And we've tried to figure out a way to overcome that, because I would love to get a safety officer or whatever. Right now, we just don't have a good solution to that, and it's a matter of manpower and money. So I don't have a safety officer, so I kind of have to assume that role of the safety officer. If we get an incident that's expanding, such as the Moore Street fire, then we go defensive, we sector it out, and I assign a safety officer from one of the engine companies or one of the ladder companies. But I think that we're not much different than a lot of other Central Ohio fire departments in the fact that we just don't have all the staffing that we would like to have. It would be awesome. You know, in Franklin County, they can call on another battalion chief from any 4 directions, you know. Unfortunately, we don't have that availability in our location. So it does put more weight on the battalion chief, and it does make your job harder. And I wish there was a better solution, but right now that just doesn't exist.
So Andrew had a follow-up question to that Grafton fire. He said, what was the stretch like for the Grafton fire? Did you use cross lays, static bed for deployment? Talking like deadlifts?
I was able to position the engine right at the stairwell. So it was probably no more than 60 feet, 65 feet from the engine to the doorway. And then they had to go up 2 flights of stairs, and they were at the fire apartment. So they pulled their 200-footer and they were right there. They had plenty of hose. But we do have apartment buildings in Newark where we would have to pull what we would call a yard lay, which is a static bed. But on the Grafton Road fire, we were able to position that the primary attack engine pretty close to the stairwell door where we did not have to pull a yard lay or extend a hose line or whatever. So, and I mean, that worked in our favor because I think we can all agree that pulling a yard lay takes a little bit more time than just pulling a pre-connect. So it definitely worked to our advantage.
Hang on, I'm trying to stay in order here. All right. Josh asked, are all of your apparatus dedicated, or do any of your stations cross staff, fire medic, etc.?
So the only apparatus that gets cross-staffed is Tower 1 out of Station 1. We actually run 2 medics out of that station when manpower allows. Medic 1 and Medic 4 run out of that station. If they are both in quarters, both of those crews will jump on Tower 1, so I would have a 4-man ladder company. If one of those medics is out, then the one medic that is there would go ahead and jump on the tower, and I would have a short-staffed ladder company. But that is the only apparatus that we cross-staff. All of the other companies, Rescue 1 is a dedicated company, Station 2 and Station 3, those are dedicated companies.
Okay, Nick B asked, Chief, how do you utilize your medic units on working fires? Do they typically link up with the engine truck companies, or do they fill additional tasks? Lastly, how is your medical standby squad designated, or is it filled by mutual aid?
Okay, so typically, the way that I handle things is the first arriving medic unit will get a fire assignment. And that might mean that they're linking up with their engine company, or that might mean that they're getting a completely separate assignment. They might be pulling a backup line, they might be doing search, who knows what. Typically, my second arriving medic unit will fill the role of the EMS sector. And so what they would do is they put their drug box, their trauma bag, and their airway kit on the cot, and they come down to the front of the building so they're immediately readily available. Now, the Grafton Road fire, that apartment building, that was a different thing, because my one rule is, if I arrive and somebody is trying to die, then the first arriving medic must assume EMS. And in that particular circumstance, that gentleman was in poor shape. I walked into the courtyard and there was a crowd of people around him, and they said, hey, this guy needs help right now. And I said, as soon as my medic gets here, I will send them right over. So I assigned Medic 2 to the EMS sector to handle patient care. The second arriving medic was also assigned to EMS sector to assist Medic 2, because I knew that that guy had significant injuries, and I knew they were going to need to intubate him, and 2 guys was not going to be enough help. So, but on the typical fire that I would have, the first arriving medic unit's going to fight fire, and then the second arriving medic is going to be my EMS sector.
All right, and Tom had a question. He said, have you ever called for admin staff from mutual aid companies to assist in those after hours incidents where you felt a need for them? And if not, why not?
So occasionally we will have admin staff that will come in the middle of the night. Either they're available or they're not available. For instance, Chief Connor, if he's available, he will respond in, and he will do whatever we need. He is extremely helpful. He will be the safety officer, or he will take command if that's what you want him to do, or he will take care of the rest of the city if you have your situation under control. But if they're not available, then there is no mutual aid admin staff. Like there is, I can call mutual aid fire companies and I can ask one of those officers to be my safety officer, but it's taken away from their company. You know, so if I'm getting an engine out of Heath and they respond with a 3-man engine company and I need their captain to be the safety officer, then they've got an engine company with no officer. So it's Rob and Peter to pay Paul, and I can do that, and I have done that. It just depends on what the circumstances are.
Well, that is all of the questions I have currently. Does anybody have any other questions? Pop them in the chat, or like I said earlier, you can unmute yourself and join the conversation. Chief, this has been great. I mean, we've been getting comments the whole time. you know, people have been really appreciating everything you've been throwing out there for us, just being vulnerable and honest, and sharing a lot of experience with us. I believe it's your brother. He said, just wanted to tell Dave, great job and thanks for the photo credit.
He and I, we love to get together and talk about, you know, stuff that either I've done or he's done. He's my twin brother, and it's kind of like having a confidant. You know, he won't beat me up if I've made a mistake. He'll say, hey, I was listening to you on the radio, you know, sound a little bit rough or whatever. So he is definitely a good guy to have in my corner, and he's a good photographer too. So he's captured a lot of great photographs that I'm very thankful for. So fellas, I appreciate you having me. I think this has been an awesome evening. I will post the link to the tactical worksheets, so those will be available to whomever. Feel free to alter them or change them or whatever you want to do, however it best helps you. But thank you for the invite.
Oh, absolutely, Chief. Thanks again for your time, and this has been great. Like I said, we hopefully got this recorded. I think it is. So we plan to post it for anybody that couldn't view it live to our YouTube channel. Then we'll post it on our Facebook page. Chief or Josh, not to put you on the spot, do you have anything that you would like to add? This is
Chief, thank you so much for giving your time. I don't know if you're able to see the questions in the chat, but we had people from Tennessee to Georgia, all over Ohio. So a lot of people from all the country tuning in to hear your talk. So this is awesome. So we really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody who gave us some time to join us today. Hopefully we all kind of took something away from it. So like Jared said, he recorded it and I recorded it. So I hope between the two of us, we didn't mess it up like we did last time. But fingers crossed anyways. Jim Hart's from Ontario, Canada, so even beyond that. So thank you, everybody. Chief, thank you again.
Fellas, everybody stay safe out there. Times are hard right now. This is even more reason to train hard and pull together. So everybody stay safe out there. And again, thanks for the opportunity to chat.
Anytime, Chief. Thank you again.
Guys, feel free to reach out to us on our YouTube or on our Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter. My personal information is on our Facebook page too. I'm the training coordinator, and that's Josh Burke, our chapter president. So appreciate everybody. Also,
do you have any questions about joining our chapter? Sorry, Jared. Our link to application stuff is on our website. Like Jared said, you can get that through our Facebook. So don't hesitate to reach out if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, anything. So
shameless plug, October 10th and 11th, Nozzle Forward. If you guys want to join, the information's on our website and Facebook. So
yep, still tickets available. So get them while they're hot.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Take care, fellas.
See you, Chief.